Morning. This is Master Serv, Creature of Rye, member of the Volkrog clan, and I'm here today under the request of James Quinlan Meservy, author of The United, The Realm of the Light, Book 1, to read to you Chapter 2 of The United. This is the cover of the book, and of course I will be reading to you in my natural form. It would be rather unsettling for most of you if I transformed into my, or shifted as we call it, into a Volkrog and read to you that way. And it would be a little bit more difficult to hold the book in my hands with paws instead of hands. So, without further ado, I am on page 18 of the CMP edition, you know, the one with the battle axe, and chapter 2 in this edition. A strong young warrior went out in the fall to hunt for food for his family, his beautiful young wife and their newborn baby boy. The warrior was familiar with the terrain, for it had been many annuals since he first sought sustenance from the bounties of Mother Earth. Jones began his annual telling of the Hobbiton legend of the Manidone, seated in his wheelchair in the backyard. The light of the fire lit the faces of his audience. Jones was the quietel of the Hobbiton tribe, which literally meant old as time. The term served as the title for the oldest living member of the Hobbiton tribe. I know the book says Old Man Jones, but I know Jones. I've always called him Jones. I never knew him in mortality, so when it says Old Man Jones, I'm just going to say Jones from now. Sorry, I'm deviating from the book. I promised James I wouldn't do it on this one. He warned if I ever deviate from the book again, he's not going to let me continue to do these videos, and I find them rather enjoyable. This Halloween Eve, there were not any new listeners in the audience at all. It consisted of his dearest friends, T.J. Parkinson and his lifelong girlfriend, Kimberly Ann Wright. Old Man Jones smiled to himself whenever he thought of Kimberly Ann, because he was the only individual she ever allowed her to call her that. Even today, I have to call Guide Leanne. I can't call her Kimberly Ann. She gets really mad at me and shifts into a griffin and starts harassing or being very aggravating. Even I can only call her Leanne. I can't imagine what it would have been like to try to attempt that while she was still a mortal. Everyone else called her Leanne. TJ and Kimberly Ann were both 17 and had the rest of their lives together ahead of them, or so they thought. TJ, Tyler James Parkinson, not Tyler Jason Parkinson. I have spoken with TJ when he found out I was reading this and wanted me to make that very clear. There are a handful of instances where James typoed and wrote Tyler Jason. It is Tyler James. He is very picky about that. I, of course, have only known him as a creature of Rye. He's a member of the Wolf clan and a very good friend of mine. I shall proceed. TJ was a little taller than average and had brown hair and brown eyes. Leanne was average height and had blonde hair and green eyes. She also had the most lyrical voice of any living person Jones knew. Still has a very musical quality to her voice, even when she's yelling at you for calling her Kimberly Ann. She was a very pleasant companion to have, and Old Man Jones always enjoyed his conversations with her. Sitting beside TJ was his older sister Susan and her fiancé Byron, both of whom were very good friends of mine. They sat holding each other, protecting one another from the chill of the late October night. Old Man Jones was extremely fond of Byron. Aside from always being willing to help him with maintaining his expansive yard, Byron convinced Blaze, Tyler James, and Kimberly Ann to assist him in transcribing all the Hobbiton legends and compiling them in a book. Jones and the other members of the tribal council were so appreciative of their hard unasked for work, that the four of them were named honorary tribal members. Next to Leanne sat Blaze. He was the only teenager in the audience who sat alone, without a girl to hold and keep him warm. Maybe that was why Old Man Jones bonded so well with Blaze. They were both alone in the world. Blaze, like his big brother, was average height and had brown hair and brown eyes. Blaze sat intent, straining to hear every word of the story, for even though Blaze and the others had heard the story so frequently he had it memorized, it was Blaze's favorite Hobbiton legend, and he requested to hear every year on the eve of his birthday. Since Blaze's birthday was on Halloween, his mother adopted the plan to celebrate his birthday the day before, when he was a little child, to avoid the Halloween parties. And the tradition stuck. On the picnic table next to the campfire, the leftover birthday cake sat alone as Blaze, who was on... the cake sat as alone as Blaze, who was on the eve of his 16th birthday. The rest of the audience consisted of TJ's parents, who were friends of Jones's, and TJ's other sister, Tiffany, who was considerably younger than TJ, between 8 and 10. Jones had a hard time keeping track of how old she was. It was easier for him to keep track of Blaze, Byron, and Leanne because they visited him every week to help with the yard work. As one can imagine, it was rather difficult to push around a lawnmower being confined to a wheelchair. I can't imagine Jones being confined... Oh, sorry, I am deviating from my script. Blaze's parents were noticeably absent from the party. His mother was at work, while his stepfather was probably at a friend's house drinking and watching this sport or another. No one really knew what happened to his real father, after walking out on his family a few years ago, but Byron was there, and Old Man Jones knew that Byron meant more to Blaze than any of his other father figures. Oh, we're back to the story again. The warrior knew that in the autumn, the best place to find game he sought was in the mountains. Jones continued in his wary old voice. As he spoke, the campfire, the trees, and the rest of the surroundings faded into darkness, and Old Man Jones found himself transported to a different time, when sagebrush, dirt, and juniper covered the landscape. He was a very talented storyteller. I can only imagine how wonderful it would have been to hear immortality when he had the magic of the Hobbiton with him. But even as a creature of Rye, Jones is a very talented storyteller. And when he gets spinning a yarn, you truly get transported. It is wonderful. The warrior was confident he knew where in the mountains his hunting would be most efficient. The warrior knew the water source he was seeking on the slope of a familiar canyon. Soon the warrior entered the canyon and followed the river until he reached the stream for which he was searching. Old Man Jones felt his legs moving through the canyon, his eyes straining to see the small stream reflect the light of the stars. It felt good to be on his legs again, even if it was only an illusion. This was not the end of the journey. Now he had to follow the spring up the canyon wall. The grade was not too steep, but it was a tough climb for even an experienced warrior. The warrior climbed the canyon until he finally reached his destination, a freshwater spring that had eroded out of a cave in a cliff face. The water from the spring gathered in a little pool, no deeper than 2 feet in the center. The cave was not large, only 8 feet high from the center of the water's surface, and was only 6 feet wide, but the warrior knew it was large enough for him to hide in. But he also knew from past failures that he would have to hold perfectly still against the wall until the ideal moment. Jones felt the canyon wind on his face. He was completely transported now, unable to even feel the wheelchair that served as his only mode of transportation. Back in these days, Jones thought, a paralyzed warrior would have been prey for the wolves and coyotes. Reaching his destination, Jones continued the story. The warrior filled his water container. The warrior was aware that his prey would not come to the spring if they could sense his presence, so he stepped lightly into the water and hid against the cave wall, out of sight of the opening and the stream. Many annuals passed. The warrior learned to use the water's reflective surface while hunting at the spring. The warrior patiently waited for his prey to get thirsty, and thought back on his youth to the first time he attempted to hunt at the spring. He was a young warrior, no older than 14 annuals. Jones smiled at the memory, as if the memory were his own. He had difficulty, Jones breathed deeply, standing on the slippery slopes at the base of the water, and fell multiple times before he could still stand long enough not to attract attention. Finally, his prey, a small herd of mountain goats, came near the water's edge. Sorry. That. I have to look proper. Downtrodden and heartbroken, the young warrior left that hunt empty-handed. Oh, what happened? I skipped what happened. He had difficulty, blah, 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 standing on the slippery slopes, fell multiple times. Finally, his prey, a small herd of mountain goats, came near the water's edge. The young warrior was so impatient that he jumped from his hiding spot too early, and the entire herd left the meadow beside the spring before the boy was even out of the water. Downtrodden and heartbroken, the young warrior left that hunt empty-handed. He was so discouraged that he even failed to trap a rabbit for his dinner later that evening. But that was many annuals past. Now the warrior was an experienced hunter and could hold still on the rocks for hours before growing tired. Old Man Jones coughed. He was brought back to the campfire. Blaze looked at him intently, hungering for every word. TJ and Leanne were holding each other close and rolling their eyes. Tiffany was wrapped in her dad's arm, fast asleep. Mr. and Mrs. Parkinson were sitting close together, sharing a blanket with Tiffany. Byron and Susan were a world away, dreaming of their life together, holding each other close and whispering. Lucky for the warrior, his wait was not that long. A herd of elk approached the spring. The warrior was careful not to move as the animals approached the water. Jones coughed again, took a drink of water, and breathed deeply. I don't know if I've ever heard him take a deep breath. Not once. He always spins his yarn so beautifully, you'd think that he never had to breathe. Of course, now he's a creature of rye, and he was an old man at that time. But let us continue with the story. First, a female took a drink from the spring, Jones said. Once again, he was transported to the cave, and he could smell the female and sense her thirst fighting with fear. A female always approached the spring first when the warrior was hunting here. The warrior knew from experience to wait until a male started to drink. When the males of the herd were relaxed enough, it was easier to catch his prey off guard. The warrior patiently waited as another female took some water, then a third. A couple more females started to drink. The warrior saw a male approach. With snake-like reflexes, the warrior coiled his legs and aimed for his prey. The warrior noiselessly sprang at an elk, a female this time. The warrior flew through the air, twisted his body, slit the throat of the prey, and landed on the ground before the herd realized what had happened. I don't think he's exaggerating on that example. I have seen... How do I put this? I have seen the memory of a handful of Hobbiten warriors, and they truly did move that fluidly. It was something impressive to watch, even as a memory. Don't ask. You're not ready to understand how I can see someone else's memories as a creature of rye, but trust me, it's incredible. The warrior patiently waited as another female took some water. Then, we're already past that. The warrior immediately started to prepare his catch for transport. As he was thanking the creature for giving her life so he could sustain the life of his family, a red light reflected on his face. Upon finishing his prayer, the warrior walked toward the red light. He entered the cavern he had never before noticed. There were shelves carved into the wall holding the glass jars that reeked of blood. Then he saw it. On a shelf next to the boiling cauldron of an unknown substance, there lay a beautiful necklace made of gold with a blood-red stone medallion, much larger and more elegant than any gem the warrior had ever seen. The warrior envisioned the medallion around the neck of his wife. He imagined the contrast of the gold with her perfect copper-colored skin, and the gem glistening on her chest. The vision was so beautiful, the warrior took the medallion and left the cave. Old Man Jones could feel the heft of the medallion as the warrior examined it. The warrior placed the medallion in his bag, gathered his kill, and transported it down the mountain. The kill was heavy, so the warrior was forced to camp the night in the valley. The following day, the warrior successfully transported the kill home before midday. Old Man Jones saw the warrior turn the bend and see his wife sitting in front of their dwelling. Jones felt the love for the woman, as if she were the owner of his Chenika, not the warrior. Chenika is a Hobbiton term meaning heart, mind, soul, love, fidelity, all rolled into one. Generally speaking, as a creature of rye, when you give someone your Chenika, that's to whom you equalize. We'll talk about that later. Oh, there was no real literal translation for the concept in the English language. For to say, I love you felt too weak, too frail to Jones, who preferred saying, you own my Janika. The warrior kissed his wife, placed the medallion around her neck, admired his bride's beauty and her new jewelry, for it was more magnificent than the warrior could have possibly imagined. The warrior left the kill for his wife to prepare and went to spend time with his baby boy. The day passed into evening. The warrior helped put his son to bed. Being tired from his long day's work, he retired to bed early. His wife soon followed. The warrior suddenly awoke to the sound of his son's cry. A loud howl pierced the warrior's ear. He sat up in bed as his wife cried out in pain. He tried to stand up, but felt a sharp pain in his lower back, and he lost all feeling in his strong legs. He cried out, yelling for help. His beautiful wife and his lovely child, on the other hand, had stopped making any noise. Jones wiped a tear from his cheek and took a deep breath. Warrior, a deep demonic voice laughed and gnashed his teeth when the warrior's wife and son were both silenced. You took something of mine, so I took something of yours. The tale was nearly over, and old man Jones was returned to the present. Only Blaze was interested in hearing more. Tiffany and her parents were asleep. Leanne also had fallen asleep, resting against TJ, and Byron and Susan were so busy looking at each other, still whispering back and forth. They were probably planning their wedding. I don't know if he mentioned that in the story yet, but they were engaged. With a rush of terror, Jones continued the story. The warrior realized that he had foolishly stolen the property of the Manadone, or he thought it was the Manadone at least, and now would have to suffer the consequences. Oh, sorry, you're not supposed to know that. It was the Manadone. Old man Jones took a deep breath and a gulp of water. Blaze was staring intently at him, knowing the tale was not quite finished. Be not foolish enough to believe that this is the only Manadone to inflict the Hobbiton, for every individual who desires physical prowess of one form or another is in danger of making a pact with the master of the dark spirits, forever losing his soul in return for that which he craves. Blaze had mouthed the words of the moral with old man Jones, for it was ingrained in his heart. That is chapter 2. I hope you enjoyed it. I am sorry for my digression. I shall work on that in the future, in future readings. That chapter 2 of The United. And have a good day.